Well, good day, everyone. And it's Wednesday, the 18th of December, as I've just pressed the record button. Time for another Club Grubbery panel. And this is a very important panel that we're having tonight, Johnny. Great to see you back on, as always, mate.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, and great to be here with such an esteemed panel as always.
Yep, a great panel. Now, we'll go straight to that panel very shortly. Many of you will recognise them, and I'll introduce them shortly. But less than a week ago, a monumental decision was made in the Queensland Supreme Court in the case where Dr. William Bay was taking on AHPRA and the Queensland Government and the Medical Board. Um, it That case has gone a long way to exposing the corrupt soft underbelly of the administrators of our medical system in this country, that being AHPRA and the Medical Board. The judges castigated them. They have shown their hand. And what that says to me is, how can we trust anything else that they've been doing when they've been so corrupt in the way that they've been managing this particular case? We know of doctors who've been suspended indefinitely for years, awaiting outcomes at the behest of this monstrous organisation, which is what it's grown into be. Now, the position, as seen by many of us, is this is a great victory, and there's no doubt about it. Exposing corruption and the soft underbelly of an organisation like this surely does require rejoicing. However, AHPRA is now a wounded animal, and there is nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal. And we need to examine the ruling by the judge, the reasons why he came to these decisions, and the impact this has on the medical profession and our country at large. We need to be circumspect about this, and that's what we're about on this program. We interviewed Dr. Billy Bay the other night. It was a great interview. He was excited, and rightfully so. But often in the glory of a victory in battle, sometimes we don't see the enemy sneaking up behind. So it's well worth our looking at this. And in order for us to do that, John, we are joined by, from the legal fraternity, Katie Ashby-Koppens, who's headed up the Aligned Council of Australia, and she's been doing great work both in Australia and in New Zealand, defending the rights of people. She has put her career on the line. There's no doubt about it. She could be deregistered at any time. That's how brave she is. And I've shared a stage with her many times in the last few months, and it's been a delight. Katie, welcome back to Club Grubbery. We love having you.
Thank you so much, Hoody and Lada. Thank you so much for having me, and it's so lovely to be on here with two of my favourites, Julie and Duncan.
And as you say, Julie Sladden, Dr. Julie Sladden, who's now on the council for West Tamar.
Yeah, that's right.
She's a councillor on West Tamar Council. She's been working incredibly hard for Russel Broadbent. She's been working very hard for AMPS. She's been working for Australians for Science and Freedom at maximum capacity. And she's an all-round great lady and a good doctor. And she's a lady who's passionate about this country and her profession. Welcome, Dr. Julie Sladden.
Thanks, Hoody. It's great to be back here too. Always lovely to see you both.
Have you on. And Dr. Duncan Syme is the deputy or the vice president of the AMPS group, which is the Australian Medical Professionals Society. They've been doing great work pulling doctors together. I think there's nearly 1,000 doctors on their books at the moment. Doctors who are awake to what's going on, who want to speak out, who have spoken out, and who are ready to go the extra mile, provided we dot all our I's and cross all our T's. And we need more doctors to do what Duncan has done. And we welcome you, Duncan, as well.
Thank you, Graham, John, and g'day, Julie and Katie. And yeah, thank you for your continuing efforts, all of you, against what is profoundly unjust on the Australian people, profoundly unjust actions by the government and the regulatory authorities on the Australian people.
Absolutely. And Duncan, we might start with you because as Vice President of AMPS, Katie has had a look at the judgment and cast her legal mind over it, and has got some concerns and some rejoicing as well. But from a doctor's perspective, Duncan, and given the fight that AMPS has been involved in for the last few years, give us a broad overview of what that victory in the court meant to you. What was it saying?
Well, I think there are really three big positives from this victory, because it's the first really big victory we've had in relation to COVID, in relation to sort of, I suppose, regulatory matters from a medical professional's point of view. There's been a lot of attempts, but they've been knocked back. So listen, it's a massive David versus Goliath effort by William Bay, and I salute his courage and persistence against the lawfare that's been waged against him and against many of my other colleagues, such as Mark Hobart and Paul Oosterhouse and Miley, for just to name a couple. So that's a huge lift to, I suppose, the troops and the public who are supporting us. Number two, what William has done is he's exposed the lack of good faith. I think what they call AHPRA and the medical board should be the model litigant, and in his action he has exposed that they are clearly not acting as a model litigant, and they don't do to virtually all doctors who have wrongthink according to them. So again, that's a major victory, and we need to make the public and the rest of the medical professionals aware of this, that they're being governed by people who don't actually act in good faith. And thirdly was from the judges, from a judicial point of view. Not that I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get into the intricacies and legal arguments, but he did make it pretty clear in his statement that AHPRA had exceeded their authority by trying to suppress political speech. And that is clearly something that they've been doing right throughout this whole sorry saga of the last 5 years. And that's, that started with their position statement on March the 9th, 2021, where they essentially smashed informed consent by threatening health professionals with disciplinary action should they have proper informed consent with their patients.
Absolutely. And Dr. Julie Sladden, is it now obvious that AHPRA has been used as a propaganda arm, or not even propaganda, more a secret police arm for the Australian government and the state governments in policing doctors and keeping them in line? Is that how you see it at this stage?
Look, I've got to say, I can only echo what Justice Bradley said. When he used the words, it was what was it? Less than profoundly unsatisfactory. I thought, well, that's the understatement of the year. We've long suspected that there were just terrible lack of conductive behaviour going on behind the scenes. And this isn't the first time we've seen it either. I don't know whether you recall recently, Dr. Mark Hobart, in his case, AHPRA denied having, I think it was some patient files, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
and then later on they owned up to having them. And Dr. Mark Hobart had said all along that they had them. So they were either very, forgetful, or they lied. And that in and of itself, and I know that Dr. Miley Trin, she's been going through the legal process as well, and she's had a few claims dropped against her. I believe things are still ongoing. And so, Billy Bay's case basically has taken to the fullest extent, really exposed just the level to which this misbehavior or this poor conduct has been going. And it is truly frightening. I mean, I never understood what the words misfeasance or malfeasance meant before, and it's really sent me back to the dictionary again to see, when you've got a public authority behaving in a way where they're abusing their power. And some of the words that Justice Bradley was using really did indicate that it had been just staggeringly bad, their behaviour. You really do have to think, well, how extensive is this? Because we've had a lot of, doctors obviously that have fallen foul of AHPRA recently. And what do we do now? Because I think there is an opportunity for an independent investigation of this body. And one of the things I've learned over the last few years, if there's one thing that doctors are united on both sides of the COVID issue, is that we're all united on AHPRA is not behaving well. It's not serving the profession. It's not functioning the way a upstanding regulatory body should be, and it's at the public's risk.
Man, you couldn't get any better than that. I mean, that's the way I know every doctor I speak to about AHPRA, they all say the same thing, the nurses and paramedics as well. Johnny, you were listening to an appraisal given by Judge Stuart Lindsay, former Federal Circuit Court judge, now retired in Adelaide, about the case. I've had a look at that as well, and I think it'd be timely, given you were evicted from AHPRA yourself as a paramedic, and given your involvement in various legal issues with them and other organisations with New South Wales Health. I think it'd be great if you and Katie could examine this ruling, and let's talk about what was good about it, and let's talk about where we need to be cautious. So go for it, mate.
Yeah, Katie, what do you think? I mean, in the Mark Hobart case, obviously, the same things happen. It'll be interesting to see where the judge goes with that. I mean, we've got a situation where the opposing counsel had to apologise to the court for misleading them. This is exactly, essentially, what's gone on here with the Billy Bay case.
Even more. So this is a judicial review of AHPRA's conduct, and the decision clearly makes out that the conduct was beyond stink. There was a failure to give William due and proper process such that natural justice was breached. And that means that the entire basis of the case has to fall away because that that full requirement of coming to the court with clean hands, following proper and due process when it came to an investigation, not having people involved that were effectively part of the complaints process, also at the meeting which made the decision to suspend him, and also at the event in which he said some things publicly on which one of the complaints was based. That doesn't just lead to possible bias. It's no doubt apprehended, but probably also actual bias. And it's quite incredible that AHPRA could get the process so incredibly wrong. And so that's what happened. Natural justice wasn't granted to Mr. Bay, and any decisions thereafter effectively fall foul of the fact that they didn't come in an appropriate manner and give him full understanding and ability to answer the allegations, because they were made very much behind closed doors, in secret and without full disclosure.
And look, we're seeing this in so many legal cases. It just is lucky that, in the words of Judge Lindsay, that or former retired Judge Lindsay, that Justice Bradley got it so right. He wrote in plain English. It was a sensible judgment, and it demonstrates that there is hope. But it seems to be more at that senior level, that Supreme Court and above level, that this is happening. I mean, I know from my experience with NCAT, my experience with the Industrial Relations Commission, the numerous police officers that have been sacked under these 181Ds, like Justin Poore and Natalie Vassallo and so many others. I mean, for misconduct. I mean, they're misusing the laws that were there to protect the public. They're misusing them, and this is just more examples of AHPRA, bureaucratic organisations like police services using whatever they can to be like SS agents. I mean, that's what it's like to me.
Absolutely. And I would say misusing is probably far too soft for the numerous doctors that I act for. I would actually say that it's abusing their powers. They are taking their powers and taking them to the nth degree. They are terminating people or suspending their licenses for much less than what they would have done in the past. And one of the cases that I was involved in a number of years ago, and AHPRA was all over this one, was a case where a doctor, an anaesthetist, gave 77 women hepatitis at a late-term abortion clinic in Croydon in Melbourne. And that was, AHPRA knew about it. They knew about it for a very long time. They put restrictions on this guy's practice to the point that he could only use one needle per surgery. And lo and behold, the very drug he had an issue with, he was allowed to continue to administer in the dark, deep depths of this Croydon late-term abortion clinic. So we've got, AHPRA not stepping in to actually save people in that situation from getting harmed. And then you've got the other where they're getting upset about Facebook posts, and some of them are quite hilarious. If people could, accept that satire should be alive and well in our world. But I think the AHPRA are abusing their power for sure.
Well, in relation to me, I know that I was suspended for entering into a conversation with a government politician, Tanya Davies, in the New South Wales Parliament, who was a former mental health minister. She was interviewing me about the COVID situation, and AHPRA then acted on that. I mean, that's how mad it is.
Mad.
Yeah. So yes, they certainly appear to be much more determined and acting with what was the judge's word, animus to those doctors who have wrongthink, who go against government narratives, or potentially put commercial interests, large commercial interests at stake. So they will attack them at absolute, you'd say, I'll use a term, psychopathic intensity.
So let's analyse the judgment while we've got the time here to do that. Katie, give us an appraisal of the judgment, the things that we can celebrate and the things we need to be cautious about.
Well, the judgment essentially does what I suggested before, which was the whole basis, the process was wrong, flawed to the point that William Bay could never have properly answered his case. And it was not just unjust and unfair, it was so incredibly egregious that he could not aptly, any decision that it was based on had to have been fundamentally flawed because the process was so bad. That is huge. That is huge. And that's very important for what I'm going to say next, which is I think that's where the case probably gets us to. The substantive matters weren't considered in any detail to the point that AHPRA could actually go back after Mr. Bay. If he's not careful and not cautious, AHPRA will, I suspect, go back after Mr. Bay, and they'll do it, and they'll do it properly this time, and they'll get the process right, and they may be justified in their decision next time round. So the substantive issues have not been dealt with. We need to keep that clear. The other important part of the case is Mr. Bay raised a lot of constitutional arguments about the legitimacy of AHPRA. And yes, while AHPRA is peer model litigant because it's a government body, agency, none of the constitutional arguments got up. So, when things are said in the media like, I've returned free speech to all doctors, that's not true. If doctors can't go out and, I would say, badmouth vaccines without possible risk of being approached by AHPRA, this case does not create the precedent for a lot of the statements that are being made publicly. And I think it's a bit of a shame because the win really needs to be, and the focus needs to be on the fact that natural justice needs to be done, not just perceived to be done, but actually done. And that is so incredibly huge. Whereas we've got all this noise and fanfare around vaccines and ivermectin and things, which I think is very much the inappropriate messaging because it's wrong.
I'd just like to echo what Katie was saying. It reminded me, I was reminded of a case in the UK, a Dr. Samuel White, who was initially, they tried to bring about some interim orders in for some statements and interviews that Dr. White made regarding COVID, very much along the lines of, what doctors in Australia have been speaking out of, but, covered a number of things. And he was called to an interim orders tribunal where some orders were imposed, attempting to restrict his ability to post his opinions on social media. He took them, they didn't do due process as well, the long story short, and he appealed that order in the High Court and won. And then the medical the medical board equivalent there basically went back and did the job properly next time, and he was his medical license was erased this year. That was reported in September 2024 this year. So similar situation, but this time, he won in the High Court, and then the medical authorities went back and did it properly this time, and now he's had his medical license erased. So I think that's a cautionary tale that we need to take note of in, you know, in the point that we're at the moment in Australia.
I think that's right. Can I just add my little bit of a spin on it here? Because I think the problem is essentially back to AHPRA. I mean, the judges basically said that they were a disgrace. What they did to William Bay, and ultimately what we know they've done to many others, is absolutely abhorrent. It's like the Gestapo, it's like the SS. These people have no bounds. They're an absolute disgrace. And I don't care what you do to me, AHPRA. I couldn't give two hoots.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, as Jared Rennick identified in estimates the other day, now my cousin, Dr. Claire Larder, is apparently the secretary or acting secretary for drug, whatever it is, for the TGA, which 95% funded by the pharmaceutical lobby. They're not interested in whether somebody died of a heart attack as a result of the Pfizer vaccine. They're prepared on the basis of some BS modelling from the WHO to overturn a coroner's decision that said that a person died from a vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, had a heart attack in front of his family. They're prepared to overturn that on the basis of some garbage model from the WHO. Now, these people are absolutely mad. Now, what we should be saying is, I agree. I think William is being a little bit not disingenuous, but he's sort of being a bit more flamboyant about the decision than needs to be. I think, as Julie and as Katie have pointed out, AHPRA can and probably will still come after doctors, nurses, paramedics for speaking out. But let me say this, AHPRA, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'll tell you why, because it was quite rightly pointed out when Dr. Claire Larder was asked by Jared Rennick why they hadn't written to everyone that was vaccine injured, she said there was 140,000. Now, if there's 140,000 people that have volunteered that they've been injured to the TGA, that is a significant bloody problem, I tell you. That is massive. That is on a scale of, you know, medical history, that is unheard of from a vaccine.
So they didn't have the manpower to respond to everybody, Johnny.
They couldn't respond, Hoodie. Now, surely AHPRA has to be saying, well, aren't any of the doctors that are standing up now and saying that these vaccines are safe and effective, people like Dr. Kerry Chant, she should be under investigation from AHPRA for spreading misinformation, because clearly if there's 140,000 people that have been injured and they've got it recorded down at the TGA, there's a big bloody problem. So I'd just say the opposite. Look, you know, I don't think what happened in that judgment gives doctors a carte blanche to basically go out there and risk their licenses. I think AHPRA will still come after you, but I think the argument should be AHPRA should be basically coming out now and saying, well, look, we're happy to have doctors come out and actually say what they think in the interest of public safety.
I'm just wondering, we all want doctors to speak out, and we've got two on this screen at the moment who have spoken out regardless of AHPRA. And so there's still a lot of people hedging their bets, and you know, we're urging any doctor who is having trouble getting to sleep at night because you know something's wrong and you're not saying anything, do yourself a real favour in the country as well, by all means. But I want to get to you, Katie. I understand that the matter about the constitutional authority of AHPRA was challenged in the court.
Was
on the judge didn't rule in favour of that argument. Does that cement AHPRA into? Does that give them constitutional authority now that he didn't rule in favour?
What I think it does is it will provide case law for the future to justify AHPRA's position. So what it does is it just deals with these constitutional complaints that were raised and just beds them down and says, no, here's a decision that AHPRA will rely on in the future if anyone else tries to raise constitutional argument about the structure and the legalities of AHPRA as an institution.
An interesting point there, too, as I will, you know, I've done a little bit of looking into the structure of AHPRA and the way it's all set up. It's a very interesting entity. But one of the things that becomes brazenly obvious is that they don't have anyone that they're answerable to. So they're not subject to the Anti-Corruption Commission. They're supposed to be, I guess, subject in a way to the ministers, but not really. And the National Health Practitioner Ombudsman is paid through funds from AHPRA and really can only give them a little slap on the wrist and say, you didn't do so well there. They don't actually have any real power. So there's no one that they're really answerable to. And that's a real worry, because when we're faced with the situation like we have now, and many doctors would more, I imagine, will be speaking up if they, weren't quite so cautious about the ramifications, then, the public is potentially being put at risk by the fact that doctors can't speak up. Oh, and on that note, I'd just like to say I'm a retired doctor now. So just in case anyone thinks that I actually surrendered my registration so that I could work more in this area. But it takes me back to the AHPRA position statement, and that was essentially an edict which contravened a doctor's ability to be able to conscientiously object, and there were no protections there for doctors to be able to conscientiously object to what was happening or to speak out. And that's a huge problem. And when AHPRA is not subject to anyone's authority or scrutiny, then, where do you go? And I think this is the battle that we've been having over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I agree completely with Julie. Unless you're accountable for your decisions, which AHPRA aren't, then it's very difficult to see that there's going to be a change in their behaviour, because ultimately the people who end up paying for the fees for these legal actions are the health professionals. The 800,000 plus health professionals are actually funding all this litigation against doctors and nurses and other health professionals and paramedics. So they pay no price for doing this. They pay absolutely no price for this. And so they are happy. They'll keep doing this until the cows come home, until we reform the system. And, I've got to say, I suspect the AHPRA was set up deliberately to have no oversight, so they could control health professionals. That is certainly what I believe. We have to, and I suspect it has to come through the profession, and all health professionals need to combine and say, this is not good enough. We need a regulator that can be held to account for the appalling decisions that it's been made, and the lives of families that have been destroyed, and the public that is being put at risk by the fact that essentially a doctor or health professional who sees something that they believe is dangerous to the public can be shut down, or their speech will be silenced because of the threat of losing their job. And being put in this limbo land, as I have been, and as William Bay and Mark Hobart and many others, Mai Lee, for years. And unfortunately, the courts up to this point have not sided with this bureaucratic body. They've lacked the courage to say, well, the legislation clearly has not stated a time length on investigations, and it should. And that's where the judges come in. The legislation is deficient and has been designed to be deficient, so they can say, well, we'll investigate you until you've gone to the nursing home and 10 feet under, and then we might stop.
Dr. Duncan, Syme, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a lawyer, but I am a concerned citizen who values the doctor-patient relationship and the confidentiality attached to that. I utterly reject and resent any government or bureaucratic interference in that relationship. We as Australians will only ever get our confidence back in the medical system and the health system in this country when that is restored and first do no harm principles are upheld. Is AHPRA a hindrance to that, or are they assisting in it?
No, clearly they're a hindrance. They've completely destroyed this doctor-patient relationship, and sent large sections of the community now do not want to have anything to do with doctors, because essentially they see the doctors as a mouthpiece of the government, and they're not going to get their honest opinion, given that the health professionals are essentially dictated to by government and other, I suppose, large corporations who set sort of agendas, via the government and the regulatory bodies.
Johnny.
Well, I think what Billy Bay has managed to do in terms of exposing the tentacles of AHPRA and getting it done in a judicial sense is a magnificent piece of work, and that really is the thing that we should be celebrating tonight. I mean, because that is a massive win. There is no doubt about it. I mean, it's even to the point now where I believe, be interested to get the panelists' view. I mean, AHPRA should be disbanded, shouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Informed.
Yeah, certainly from my personal viewpoint, AHPRA is a major problem to health, the health and well-being of the nation, because they're shutting down proper discussion over serious medical issues, and therefore once you shut down and censor proper scientific debate, you're going to end up with massive problems. And it's obviously heavily influenced by pharmaceutical companies who have very, very large pockets and are influencing politicians and regulatory authorities.
Absolutely.
Katie, can you see any other speed bumps in the judgment?
No, well, not speed bumps per se, but I did mention before that I think it's extremely important that Mr. Bay is careful with what he does say and do from now, because what got him into hot water in the first place was being bombastically verbose and saying things that, it was his speech and what he was saying was getting him into trouble. He could be lining himself up for that kind of behaviour, sort of that kind of review of his behaviour again, and they could get the process right next time. And I just want to really highlight the fact that, how it works is that if you get the process wrong, the decision is undermined. This is the situation here. If they get the process right, they could suspend him again and require, and put him through the pain of the next 2 years at going through this process. And he's gone through it, I have to say, quite quickly, in the fact that there's some people that are still going after 5 years that they've been suspended. And it always makes me wonder, for a pandemic that was so bad that they had to suspend doctors and nurses and the like, you've really got to wonder, really? Was it that bad? Or you just don't want to hear the very real concerns that people are making about the hundreds of thousands of injured people that they're seeing. And that is what has to be perhaps the most disgusting thing about what AHPRA has done, is they have allowed people to be hurt. They have blood on their hands, and all in the name of commercial interests and an incorrect government narrative, which is every day the story gets worse. Every day there is more and more evidence that there is an absolutely horrendous problem that is playing out. And every day they are just arrogantly ignorant to it all. So the speed bump, I think, is William needs to tread carefully here. And I think he also needs to properly represent the outcome of the decision, because I think it's also giving a lot of people false hope. And I would hate people to run off the cliff on the advice that William's given them, that they could speak freely about vaccines now and, talk openly about prescribing ivermectin and the like. So the speed bumps are multifaceted, I guess, and are for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And Duncan and Julie, AMPS has been passed a ball, right? They're charging at the try line. They've been passed a ball. This decision is a valuable ball.
Absolutely.
And, how do you see, I know you guys haven't met at executive level yet to discuss all of this. What could AMPS do now with this revelation that's been backed up by a Supreme Court judge in Queensland that AHPRA basically has acted corruptly. And any of their judgments or decisions in the past few years, how can they ever be trusted? How can AMPS use that for benefit now?
Well, the goal will be to get this out. I mean, the level of corruption. Well, corruption is that the right word, or the lack of good faith that AHPRA and the medical board have exhibited. Get that out to the rest of the medical professionals, galvanise them, unite them, and so we can come together to reform the system. And that's really, I think, the biggest opportunity that William has created for us. It should be the tinderbox or the stone that starts the avalanche against this organisation, which is works profoundly against the interests of all Australians.
I would agree with what Duncan says, and I mean, I'm simply a member of AMPS and have just been, very, very proud to be involved in the work that they've done over the last few years, and just to be associated even in a little way. They were the one organisation that were basically standing firm amongst all this. I was thinking as you were speaking about, the consequences of that AHPRA position statement, in March 2021, which essentially, for all intents and purposes, gagged the doctors. And in the meantime, the national law was amended. I can't remember whether it was at the end of 2022 or 2023, so that now there are legal ramifications of breaching, public trust, or not breaking that trust and that confidence. And so those restrictions on doctors' speech have almost been enshrined a little bit more, and that's why we still have to be cautious. But that said, speaking in a scientifically evidence-based professional way, that we want to see our profession do is what is needed at the moment. And I do think this is an opportunity, as Duncan was saying too, for doctors to be to gather themselves, to gather the information. We need to be organised. We need to be smart. I think we need to be strategic about how we move forward, because, we're essentially dealing with an organisation that is only maximum 14 years old, and it's had more independent inquiries, I think, than pretty much any other organisation, though don't quote me on that. But I remember when I looked in it a few years ago, it had about 11 inquiries for the number of years that it had been formed. So there have been problems with this regulation body from the start, and I would actually question whether reform is possible and whether it's rebuilding that's needed. But regardless of that, I think it's time for doctors to unite and stand strong on this issue, because ultimately it's the public's health, the health of Australians, the health of patients who we've sworn to protect, that's suffering. And we need to make the most of this opportunity that it presents itself to push the needle on this one.
Oh, the other thing is too, I mean, clinicians have had their lives absolutely ruined by AHPRA through anonymous complaints, through people called John Smith that they can't find. But here we've got a clear-cut case of officials at AHPRA, likely with medical qualifications, people on boards, that have been found by a Supreme Court judge to have been acting in the most dreadful manner. Now, what's going to happen to their registrations? I mean, surely that doesn't fit the model code of conduct down at AHPRA. I mean, are we going to see these people suspended that were involved in any of this process with William Bay? Well, surely that's got to be an outcome that should be entertained.
It was a question I wondered myself, Johnny. Based on their own standards of conduct, shouldn't they now be suspended? But I mean, who is it for me to say? But I just kind of, crossed my mind, if their conduct has been so bad, and Justice Bradley was scathing, I would say, what does it take for them to be suspended?
And for to actually point to the model litigant rules and say you've breached these, that is beyond scathing. So I would definitely be asking and ensuring, and this maybe could be a position that AMPS takes, is to be asking for full and proper investigations of how this woeful conduct could happen. And that's the other tragedy in this. Who's paying the costs? Well, it's definitely not coming out of their personal pockets. And there's a lot of costs that will be being paid, not only just for AHPRA's lawyers, the state's lawyers, and William Bay's lawyers, because William's getting full costs, not his own personal hourly rate, because I think he was self-represented, but all other costs. Someone's paying, and it's not the people that mucked up.
Look, I think I feel for AHPRA in some way, because I think at the moment I've got a bit of a soft spot for them. What are you laughing at, John? No, I do. And I'll tell you for why, because when Michelle said to me, "You're not going to get the jab, are you?" And I said, "Well, I was thinking about it." And she said, "Aren't you going to do your due diligence?" The first thing I did was contacted 3 GPs who I knew very well. And they, to a man, said, "Look, I wouldn't rush into this if I were you, but don't tell anyone I told you." And I said, "Why wouldn't you tell anyone? Why wouldn't I tell anyone you told me? Because I can be struck off by AHPRA." Now, that got the hair standing up on the back of my neck, and it woke me up to what's going on. So I really thank AHPRA for that. I think their efforts to shut up the doctors has actually woken sleeping tigers all over Australia. And sadly, that wonderful organisation will probably have to reap the sowing and face its judgment one day. So I'm sorry you have to go through that, AHPRA, but I do appreciate every effort you made to shut up just because it woke me up.
And Graham, it's not just the AHPRA, it's also the medical boards, who I understand are faceless organisations that nobody knows who sits on them. So while AHPRA is in the firing line very often with this, it's also the medical boards that sit beside and in cahoots with, that are entirely faceless, that need really to be answering to all of this.
Thank you.
What
I was going to say that, Justice Bradley, I basically said that they were the one and the same in William Bay's case. So, they're two arms of the same person.
And they didn't dispute that either.
No.
Katie, I was just going to ask. I mean, given in my view that the judiciaries have been dreadful places, I mean, I won't say corrupt, but crikey, it must be near enough to it. I don't know what the word would be, but certainly politicised. When you see the appointments that have occurred after certain cases where people have been put on as High Court judges and judges of appeal and all this sort of nonsense, and we look at this garbage that went on with the Pfizer one. I mean, a fair income. I mean, if that doesn't require some sort of review in the Senate, I don't know what does. I mean, do you think that Judge Bradley's decision will now resonate and maybe send a message to all the judges that maybe we need to have a better look at what's going on here?
That's quite a loaded question, John, and quite difficult, because I think it's probably comes down to personal situation for a lot of judges. So Bradley, for example, could be close to retirement age. I didn't look at that information beforehand. So he may have nothing else to lose. He may not need to go to another cushy job. He might not have, further political ambitions that he wishes to rise the ladder in. That could have been reasons for the decision that William received. I don't know. But look, I am the first person to say that I have to give very different legal advice nowadays doing cases about COVID than I ever had to do before, because everything's been turned on its head. And so I would think that it's being very widely discussed.
I mean, it's like the old days, isn't it? When you used to get the police would get a matter, and the criminals would get their solicitor, and they'd keep deferring it until they got the judge that was going to give them the right decision. It's not dissimilar on a different scale, though, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And you'll have, you've still got judges that have political persuasion, and sometimes that's very hard to get rid of those things. But the situation that we've always had with the COVID cases is that all of the judges have been just as pulled into it as you and I have, and the everyday Australian. Everyone was impacted by COVID such that they've got a point of view. So I really do think that that probably lends itself to a lot of the reasons for the decisions that we get nowadays, putting aside the fact that a judge may have been the lawyer for a particular client for the previous 6 times in the last 2 decades. So look, putting that to one side, I think it's probably quite different. Depending, yeah, just it's very circumstantial, but and I think that probably rather than saying corrupt, it's a failing of the system, which we've seen throughout COVID, and a failing of the judiciary to maintain its independence as the third branch of government.
Wonderful. Yeah, I get that. And look, I know we've only got you guys for another 3 or 4 minutes because you've got commitments. You've been very gracious in giving us this hour at short notice. I want to say one thing, that I have at times watched William Bay doing what he does, and I've cringed, and I've thought, oh, what's he doing that for? Why is he doing that? He's a very unique personality. He's got a very unique personality. And he and I spoke many times when he first came out, and John was in the car one day, and the two of us were talking to him as we drove up. I think it was going to Corrokai, John.
Yeah, that's right.
And we spoke to Billy for about 2 hours, and we highlighted that maybe he needs to tone this down and that down, and that would help if he did. And then I saw the video where he walked into the AMA conference in Brisbane, and he did what he did. And I think that only someone with the personality of William Bay would have been able to do that. And the reaction he got when those other doctors walked out of the room was priceless. And that is the action that brought this whole thing down on him through AHPRA and the medical board, which brought this case to fruition. So quite often we do things that stun other people in the way we perform our duties in this whole battle. But sometimes you've got to have a unique personality and large testimonials to do things like Billy Bay has done. And this has exposed a soft underbelly. And I'm very grateful that it has done that. I'm grateful for that day that he walked into the AMA conference in Brisbane and did what he did. What I did with Qantas was, a lot of people have said, took a lot of kahunas as well. But I didn't walk into a huge public gathering and do that. I did that with the security of the internet. So I tip my hat to Billy Bay for that. I really do. And you know what? We can all gain so much from this. We can all learn from it. We can all gain from it. This is a war that many of us have never asked for. There's no manual, despite the fact that some people seem to have the notion that their way is the only way of fighting this battle. This is fought on many fronts. And so as long as we stay in the fight, we can get there. And I think we've all done that. Credibly. The 5 of us on this screen and many others we've shared this screen with have done that credibly. So I think onward and upward, it's definitely opened the crack in the damn wall a lot wider. Would you all agree with that?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I think it's again, it's exposed the really profoundly, unsatisfactory behaviour what the judge said at the highest level, and that has to have a major ripple effect.
Absolutely. So Billy Bay, you've had me scratching my head for the last 3 years, and I'm still scratching it, but I thank you. I thank you, because we're all in this fight together. So Julie, are you comfortable to pray us out?
I'd love to, Hoodie.
Okay, God bless you. Let's do it.
Heavenly Father, I just thank you for, first and foremost, for these wonderful people to share the panel with today. Thank you for the win that Billy Bay had recently in the courts, and the timing and the strategy that went behind this, Lord. We know that your ways are the ones that are going to win at the end of the day. We already know who has the victory. But Lord, I just ask that you strengthen those who are in the battle now. You give fresh wisdom and energy and refreshment, especially over the coming Christmas and New Year period. Lord, as we work out the way forward next, especially for the Australian people and for the profession. I ask for a blessing over all those in this battle, Lord, and I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Julie. And can we call for common sense in the media and governments around the country at the moment who are trying to resurrect a revival of the COVID virus? I mean, for goodness sake, give yourselves a break, will you? So thank you all for watching. Dr. Julie Sladden, thank you for that beautiful prayer and your time. We know you've got to go. Katie, you're on holidays and you're in a beautiful location in New Zealand and you've got to get back to that. We love you dearly. We thank you so much for your honesty and your hard work and your courage. And Dr. Duncan, Syme, always, mate, always a level head, always pragmatic and always available. We thank you all three for coming on. Johnny?
You just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up. Stay under the trees. Have a wonderful Christmas, everybody. Don't forget what you did yesterday got you to today. Do it one day at a time. It's a great country we live in on both sides of the Dutch. And it is so because of the beautiful people that live in it. And you're one of them. So God bless you. And we'll see you very soon again on Club Grubbery. Thank you, panel. And good night for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham, John, Julie, and Katie.
Thanks.